This is the Mountainsmith Bear Creek 4-person tent, and it is an odd but good little tent. And it's currently the #1 best-selling budget tent at LL Bean. And today I'm going to take you on a full tour of the Bear Creek, including all of its quirks and features. All right, we're gonna start the quirks and features with what is probably the quirkiest quirk on the Bear Creek tent, and that is this little guy right here that I'm affectionately calling the closet door. You see, this tent actually has 2 vestibules, which is not uncommon for a tent of this size. However, it's interesting to note that the rainfly on this side of the vestibule has no external outlet. In other words, you can't get out of this little door even though it unzips here. But what you can do is use this extra space under here as a bit of a closet to store extra gear under the rainfly, but not inside the body of the tent. All right, the next oddity of the Mountainsmith is the ambiguous sleep orientation. Now, in a tent of this design, you would typically expect the sleeping pads to be oriented parallel to the door. However, this tent is wide enough that you could also orient the pads perpendicular to the door. And this is further complicated by the fact that both of the storage pockets in this tent are on the door side, which means if you did your natural inclination and put the sleeping pads parallel to the door, somebody wouldn't have access to any storage pouches, which seems a bit odd with a tent like this. Now, speaking of storage pockets, as you can see, there's a storage pocket here on the tent, and there's also one over here. These are all of the storage pockets in the tent, and it's worth mentioning that this one here is very large, but it's divided in the middle in order to create 2 storage spaces, whereas the one on the other side is just simply a large pocket. Kind of interesting to me that they divided one of these pockets and not the other. All right, now we're outside the tent, and this is the floor of the tent, and interestingly, this is the included footprint. Yes, it does come with a footprint in the bag, and as you can tell, the material between that footprint and the floor of the tent is nearly indistinguishable. And in fact, I wouldn't be at all surprised if this is actually the exact same material. I do know that the floor of the tent is made out of a 68D or denier polyester material, but at this price point, you do sometimes get tents that will give you a more durable 75D material, and so I would rather Mountainsmith just give us a thicker and more durable floor rather than giving us the included footprint. All right, next I want to draw your attention to these zippers, because there's actually something a little bit interesting going on here. You see, these are YKK brand zippers, and if you don't know already, YKK is actually the most premium zipper brand in the world. However, it has these little fabric poles on it that are quite lightweight and don't feel heavy or solid in your hand, and as a result, it kind of feels on initial use like these are cheap zippers. However, they're really not, because they have these premium zippers on them, and in fact, this is the cheapest tent that I've ever seen YKK brand zippers on myself. Usually you're gonna see this in more expensive tents. So for example, I've seen this in REI brand tents like the REI Basecamp, the REI Wonderland, and I'm sure there's others that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head. Now, something really unique about this Mountainsmith tent is actually that it's rated as a 2-season tent. Now, you might wonder, why is that unique? Well, actually, most of the tents for car camping that are in this class of tent are actually rated as 3-season, and this is something that is rated by the manufacturers themselves. So this is not a standardized thing, and so Mountainsmith actually specifically chose to call this a 2-season tent, which is pretty interesting, especially because how rare this is. I don't think I have actually ever used a tent personally that is rated as a 2-season tent before. Most of the time it's 3-season, which means you can do summer camping, maybe a little bit of spring and fall camping, depending on your geography and what the weather's like. But 2-season is basically the company saying, yeah, this is a summer tent and you're going to want to use it in warm weather. And you can kind of see that in the mesh coverage of the tent. It has a tremendous amount of mesh, and if you take the rainfly off, you can really see that, hey, this is a tent that's going to be well ventilated and probably isn't going to keep away a lot of wind and cold if you're going in cooler weather. All right, the next little quirk of this tent is this little locking tightening mechanism on the guy lines. You see, when it's latched down like this, you cannot tighten it nor loosen it. It's just fixed in place. However, when you lift that little latch up, you can tighten it or loosen it to your heart's content, but as soon as it goes down, it's locked again, which is a unique little feature. All right, now I'm up here on the top of the tent to show you the vents. There is a vent at this blue panel and the one on the other side of the tent. However, they are so well disguised that I didn't actually realize they were vents when I first used this tent. You see, it just pops up like that, and it is nice to have vents like this to just give a little bit of extra ventilation. All right, now these are the 9mm aluminum poles that come with this tent, and it's not unusual to have a tent in general that has aluminum poles, but in this price range, it's fairly unique because typically a tent in this budget price range would have fiberglass poles, but here we have aluminum, which are more durable, so that's a nice feature.
Another thing you should know about the Bear Creek is that the stuff sack is actually quite difficult to get the tent back into, and so this is not a problem if you want to use an aftermarket bag that's a little bit bigger or a storage bin, but if you like to be able to use the original stuff sack, then this is something to keep in mind.
Now, if you're actually looking to buy a tent and you're thinking about this one, then I highly suggest you go watch this video right here, because in that video, you'll see a tent that's actually half the price of this one, and I think it's also a better quality tent. So go watch that video and I'll see you over there.